All right, good afternoon, everyone. We're here today to talk about exciting project in the South District, Bull's Head Revitalization. And we're joined by members of NBD, so I'll turn it over to Commissioner Miller to kick us off.
Thank you, President Melendez. I appreciate your time, you and the other council members, to spend a little bit of time with us talking about one of my favorite topics. Everybody kind of knows that, so I apologize in advance. But Bull's Head is a very important project to me, going way back to when I was a child growing up in this area. We spent lots of time at Bull's Head, and essentially anything that you wanted to buy, you could buy at Bull's Head. There was a department store, there was 3 supermarkets, a number of other kinds of businesses that were all at Bull's Head. And my mom didn't drive, so she would take all of us and line us up, and we would walk to Bull's Head. So it's just a very important place. The first, official job I had was working in Bull's Head. I worked in the pharmacy there for 8 years, and so I'm very excited about seeing something happen with this area that has gone, down about a long way from where it was. So I'm looking forward to hearing Rick and Eric Rinsky, who is the project manager on this, and Eric Frisch, who is our deputy commissioner, are working hard on this. So I'll let Rick go, and he can talk about what we'd like to tell you. Rick, go ahead.
Oh, well, Commissioner, I think Rick is going to run the slides, and
okay.
I am going to provide the commentary, and then Rick, being the subject matter expert here, I'm asking to chime in every opportunity possible to make sure anything I say is correct and everybody's getting the best information. But thank
Great.
you, Commissioner Miller, and thank you to all of our council members present here today to learn more about the Bull's Head Revitalization. I'm Eric Frisch, Deputy Commissioner of Neighborhood and Business Development, and as the Commissioner said, with us today is Rick Rinsky, who's been the project manager for this Bull's Head Revitalization for many years now. Next slide, Rick. All right, so click through this as you can, but this slide summarizes the planning process that we have gone through, and the public has joined us along the way with the Bull's Head Revitalization. I'd simply characterize this as lengthy and detailed, a lengthy and detailed process. The current iteration of Bull's Head Redevelopment has its roots in a community-driven planning effort that began in 2009 and took a big leap forward through the Brownfield Opportunity Area planning process that was begun in 2015. That culminated in a Brownfield Opportunity Area designation by New York State in 2021. There's been strong interest and participation, as you know and can imagine, by and on behalf of the community. And that's really evidenced by an average of 90 attendees per meeting that have been held over the course of this planning process. And the feedback that we have received from the community, of course, figures heavily in the concept plans that have been developed thus far and are guiding us as we go forward. Next slide. Thank you, Rick. Here you can see the 3 geographies that are involved when we speak of the Bull's Head planning efforts. The broadest area on the map here, as highlighted in blue, is the Bull's Head Brownfield Opportunity Area. And that stretches from the former Taylor Instruments site on Ames Street, roughly east to Jefferson Avenue, north up to the CSX rail line, and then south primarily along Main Street and properties that front Main Street. The area shown in what I would describe as a magenta or perhaps a pink of some kind is the urban renewal area. And that is That is what covers the urban renewal plan that was referenced on the earlier slide. And the area then shown in yellow on the map is the redevelopment area. And that is the current focus of activities in Bull's Head now, and serves as kind of the catalyst for broader investment in the Bull's Head area. It's this area that we're discussing today. So focusing in on that redevelopment area, we've kind of broken that down further for ease of discussion today into a northern area and a southern area, with Main Street kind of serving as that dividing line. In the northern area, the city has assembled more than 40 properties and has nearly completed demolition activities. All along, we've been performing environmental due diligence as there are multiple brownfield sites to contend with. And in the south portion of the Bull's Head redevelopment area, the land assembly, I guess you could say, was simpler. I put that in quotes in that only 2 properties were put together. The largest, of course, being the Bull's Head Plaza, which takes up a majority of the site. Demolition in the southern area is ongoing with the first phase of Plaza demolition now complete. And again, just as in the north, we are dealing with multiple brownfield sites here as well. And on the slide, you can see how we describe the sort of community context in both the north and south areas, with the commercial corridors focused generally on kind of Main Street, as well as Genesee Street, and then surrounded by largely residential character to the north, to the west, and east and south of the overall area. So focusing in on this north area, we really can't overemphasize enough the complexity involved in the environmental cleanup work required to deliver this redevelopment in the Bull's Head area. In the north area, some cleanup has already taken place, as you probably are aware. There's 2 sites that are actively advancing into the cleanup process along York Street, and more is still to come. We anticipate that all cleanup will be complete in the northern area by 2025, but that does not mean that that's when development has to wait until. We'll be working with the development team to identify buildable sites in advance of that, so that development may commence sooner while work is still advancing. See that time frame right there. Looking at the south area, there is a New York State Department of Environmental Conservation Superfund site at 68 to 92 Genesee Street. There are other known areas of concern. We also have been doing our due diligence in this location as well. Cleanup here requires that the remainder of Bull's Head Plaza be fully demolished so that investigations can be completed and that cleanup effort can begin in earnest. But again, although we anticipate that all cleanup will be completed by 2025 in the southerly area as well, we will be working with the developer and the development team to identify buildable sites that can be advanced prior to that. We want to be sure that the community is seeing progress taking place, not just in the form of land being moved, but in actual buildings taking shape. Next slide. So on the left is the aerial image that you've been seeing of the Bull's Head area, with Main Street in the middle and Genesee Street going north-south and meeting up with Brown Street, which intersects with Main Street at a pretty severe angle, and then to the west, where West Avenue and Chili Avenue branch off from Main Street. On the right-hand side is the aforementioned concept plan. That serves as the basis for redevelopment planning efforts, or redevelopment efforts, I should say, going forward. And what you see here, this was first reviewed with the public in 2019, and again through the Urban Land Institute work in 2021. And you can see, you know, the streets, some of the street work that is proposed. But what I do want to note is that the new buildings that are shown here, they're not to be taken literally. They are intended to show the potential build out of the redevelopment area. The new streets, on the other hand, or at least the extension of Genesee Street to the north of Main Street and the realignment of Brown Street, we do anticipate that those will largely be built in a similar format. I think the roundabout that's to the north of Main Street, that's kind of an interesting site feature to build around. That will be investigated in further detail as we get into the street design process. Next slide. So this highlights the potential new development sites as well as that public infrastructure. The development sites are shown in blue, and the street improvements such as the aforementioned Genesee Street extension and Brown Street realignment, as well as streetscape and multimodal transportation enhancements along the primary corridors. Next slide. So with respect to development, you may recall that the city issued a request for qualifications from developers in July 2020 with a goal of identifying qualified developers, and that ultimately resulted in the selection of the Dawson team. It's a national developer that does work all over the country. It's a minority-owned firm. They were selected in April of 2021. Their team includes others from around the country, as well as local Rochester involvement, firms that are not only from this area, but involve people who are specifically from the neighborhood. We entered into a memorandum of understanding with the development team, and they are tasked with preparing that preliminary development plan that will be presented to the community in late summer or fall of this year. As you know, and surely can imagine, a lot of funding has gone into making this Bull's Head redevelopment, bringing it closer and closer to reality. $10 million roughly in city funding has been approved through the capital improvement program since 2014, of which about 6.4 has been spent thus far on pre-development activities. The remaining funding here is going to be used for all of those things that I discussed earlier: continued acquisition, relocation, demolition, environmental work, and additional design, and as well RURA funding being used for the relocation of the Monroe County STD clinic that's at Bull's Head Plaza. And as you see, that requires a specific type of compliant medical space. But it isn't just city funds that have been going for this. The city has been very diligent in identifying and securing grants from federal and state sources whenever possible. Some of them are being listed up on the screen now, a variety of planning and cleanup grants that total nearly $2 million. And we are currently pursuing a grant for federal transportation funds through the Genesee Transportation Council to deliver the street infrastructure improvements focused on, again, Genesee Street, Brown Street, and Main Street, those federally designated arterial and collector streets that would be eligible for federal funding. So that is all of the slides that we have prepared today. I didn't need to turn to Rick for anything thus far, so I'll consider my presentation a success. But one, I'd like to ask if Commissioner Miller or Rick have any other information they would like to present to council, and then of course we would open it up for questions.
Great job, Eric. I think you covered everything. nothing comes to mind at this moment.
I would just like to offer one, just very quick comment, because I think some folks might say, well, but why? Why Bull's Head? Why is this important? What's so special about the Bull's Head area? We have lots of areas that need work in the city. And so I just want to say that, as we look at this area, both, in the past and in the present, we have 5 streets, really 6 streets, that all come together at one point. So this place where West Avenue and Chili Avenue and Genesee Street and West Main Street and Brown Street and York Street all come together has since the early 1800s been a center and a hub for commerce and for retail. So it's very important as a Western gateway to downtown. It's very important as more than 20,000 cars a day go back and forth on Main Street into downtown and out of downtown. It's very important because we have a major health facility there. The very first hospital that Rochester had when it was started back in 1857 and still operates today is St. Mary's Hospital, with nearly 1,000 workers in the building. And those 1,000 workers have said, quite a bit, we're working here, but boy, it'd be great if we had some place to go for lunch, or it'd be great if there was some place we could go to buy something. And there are some businesses that have been very successfully operating in Bull's Head for quite some time. But there are also a number of businesses that are vacant storefronts or buildings that have been demolished. So it's a very important part of Southwest Rochester. It's a very important area that leads folks into our center city and leads folks out of our center city. And I think it's just a very important area, as we have many of these areas around the city, but this one in particular is one that, we've been very successfully moving this along, but it has taken, I think, a very long time. And it, may find, you may find yourself, as I often do, frustrated at how long it takes to get things done. But nevertheless, we haven't given up. We will continue working on this. We will get it done. And I believe that when this is completed, we will have created something that will provide a significant amount of new housing for folks in the area, along with businesses, both commercial spaces and retail spaces and other kinds of public amenities. So that's kind of my overview, but thank you for your time, and we're happy to answer questions that you might have.
Great, thank you so much.
President Melendez, I have a question.
Yes, Councilmember Harris.
Thank you very much, President Melendez. Commissioner Miller, thank you to you and your team for a job well done in keeping this alive. When I was president of the 19th Ward Community Association, I remember we were talking about the brownfield opportunity in Bull's Head. That's how far I remember this project starting, and I'm sure it started well before that time. I'm really excited to hear that you guys have chosen a minority-owned developer, but I'm concerned. I was wondering, how are you guys going to guarantee, or is there a plan to offer opportunities for jobs to minority men and women here in this community for the project?
Okay, well, I can
Okay.
say a couple words, then Eric is happy to add more. But hiring or bringing the Dawson Group in, it was very intentional, Councilmember Harris, exactly for that reason, because Dawson has a very, very strong history in other projects that they've done all around the country in ensuring that we are including, minority and women-owned businesses in this. Our local partner, actually Dawson's local partner, is USC, which is a woman-owned business. But there is also a very specific plan to ensure that minority and women-owned businesses are involved in every aspect of this, both from the design and construction aspect, but also from the ultimate businesses that will be located here. And Eric, if you wanted to add something, I'm happy for that.
Yeah, no, Commissioner, that's absolutely right. And we would certainly work with the development team and any proposals that come in to make sure that we're taking advantage of workforce requirements and putting into place our standard to make sure that our residents and specifically our minority and women-owned businesses and residents benefit from the investment.
Thank you. And then I also like to, and I know it's really hard to see from the renderings, but is there, and it may be too early, but I'm just curious as to what kind of parking options will be gained or lost, street or not on street parking from this project. So I know, you know, being that it's a walkable community, you know, there's a number of parking spaces to allow for access to businesses and stuff. So I don't know how that's being addressed. It's really hard to see from your renderings, but something I was just interested in knowing.
Well, with respect to on-street parking, you know, we're going to get into that when we begin the preliminary street design process. But the concept plan, at least, as shown, identifies some areas of on-street recessed parking, including locations that don't currently offer parking today. So I think there would likely be a net increase in parking that's available, especially as we square off the intersection of Genesee Brown and Main. Will help to improve just the overall safety and accessibility of the intersection. That's really going to encourage more trips to be taken on foot and crossing what is now a complicated, let's say, intersection to navigate. Simplifying it will not only improve that from a pedestrian standpoint, but will effectively reduce the number of lanes that are required, which can then increase the provision of on-street parking. As for the off-street parking, as you can kind of see, we are largely, at least conceptually, and again, we'll work with the development team, but identifying that parking would considerable amount of parking would be provided and screened by buildings and other uses with that parking contained in the rear.
Thank you very kindly. I'm looking forward to this project finish. And thank you again, Commissioner Miller and your team for all the hard work. And the community engagement was phenomenal. I'm just certainly looking forward to seeing that kind of engagement for all projects with the city. And I'll yield from my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Smith.
Thank you. Yeah, and I echo Councilmember Harris's comments around work well done. So I have two questions. The first question, given our county and city's high STD rates, I just want to be assured that there's not a lot of interruption of services of the county clinic that is currently in Bull's Head. And I also wanted to know more about the housing opportunities that you mentioned. Is there a sense of a number of units and what type of units?
Absolutely. I'll actually ask Rick if he could take that.
Sure. Thank you. Let's see, in response to the first question about the STD clinic, so the Monroe County STD clinic currently located in the Bull's Head Plaza, they are in the process of relocating now to a property that actually on this rendering is towards the right side of the graphic there. It's 819 West Main Street, sort of that one-story gabled roof structure just next to Churchill Place. They're currently in the process of moving there, and they will not disrupt their operations during that move. We've been insured about that, So that's the one question. The other question is on the units. So we have done certain levels of market studies and analysis to look at what sort of a capacity, if you will, of a full build out of mixed uses, including residential. We haven't gone to the specific categorization of the types of units just yet, although what we do know is we're looking at a range of types of affordable housing. And I can say that through the public planning process, senior housing resonated pretty strongly throughout that process. So we anticipate senior housing as part of that. But yeah, we really want to give the development team the chance to do their complete due diligence and figure out exactly where, the number of units, the type of units, those kind of questions are going to land.
But you mentioned, sorry, just wanted to clarify your response, but you did mention that they are going to be looking at the residential capacity and prioritizing based on the market study.
Yes.
And their own, the market studies that we've had completed thus far were really in response to the planning process that we completed. They certainly will want to do their own. And I don't feel that they're going to come up with anything really that different than what we already looked at, but they certainly want to make sure that through their own lens and analysis that they will have satisfied the need for the various types of affordable units in the community.
Thank you.
Councilmember Pio?
Yes, that area has plenty of small businesses being, I wouldn't want to say being lost due to redevelopment here, but they will have to be moved or need to close down. What are we doing to help those small businesses that are currently there to relocate and or kind of be given first opportunity for the areas of redevelopment, given a good rental space, so we're not kind of pushing them out of the area?
I'm happy to address that question. Thank you. You almost answered the question with your question. The businesses that are currently in the targeted development area, we are working diligently with and have been for quite some time now to ensure that they can relocate. The preference has always been, if not the mantra, has always been to try to relocate them within the neighborhood. If a business cannot relocate in the neighborhood, then we try to keep them in the city. This has just been our ongoing process. To your comment on, sort of having a first dibs at space, that will be newly built as part of this project. That's another part of this that we've maintained, that if they choose to relocate, it's not likely that they could do one-step relocation from where they are now to something new. That's something that we've been analyzing all along. What we found out is that environmental due diligence and cleanup seems to be in the way of that as far as sequencing and timing goes. But yes, absolutely. The businesses that are currently in this area would have first dibs at space that gets newly developed. I don't know, Eric and Dan, if you wanted to add to that at all.
Well, I would just say, Councilmember Pio, that what Rick said is absolutely the case. Anything that we have acquired building wise that had a business in it falls under eminent domain, which means that the Uniform Relocation Act applies, which means that we pay to relocate the business. We have to identify suitable replacement space. And I think for any businesses that have been affected, we have been successful in either finding them a new place, with the example of the STD clinic being one of those, or we have found that they were then perhaps ready to retire, which was the case with Mama Kim's Diner or some of the other businesses where folks were done. There are only a couple of businesses left that need relocation. There is a shoe store and cap store, Kips and Caps, that is located on the corner of Genesee and West Main. So they still require relocation, and we're working with them. There's a Chase Bank branch in the plaza, and we've been in contact with the folks at Chase over the last couple of weeks about potential locations for them. And then there are two businesses that are still operating. Doug's, actually, it's now Andy's Deli. It used to be Mr. Doug's Deli. It's now Andy's Deli, and Universal Heating. And those businesses are not being moved. They will stay exactly where they are. They requested that they be allowed to participate in the part of this new development, make appropriate adjustments to their buildings and the building facades so that their buildings fit in. And we heard very loud and clear from the the folks in the area that they really would like to see some of the older structures retained. So we will be keeping Andy's Deli. We will be keeping Universal Heating. Those buildings won't be, the fronts of the buildings on Main Street will be the same as they are now, only fixed up. We're not doing anything to the Presbyterian Church, and they're looking to sell that. And if there's a way that we can find a buyer for that, we would like to see that church remain. And that's pretty much it. All of the other businesses were relocated. There was a church in the former post office. They were relocated into a new building for them. So, we've been very successful in making sure that everybody that was there was not just taken out of their building, but in fact was helped with relocation assistance from the city.
Dana, can I add, thank you. Can I add that the community also spoke up about the laundromat, and the laundromat that's on the southwest corner of what's generally that Bull's Head Plaza block next to Clifton, and they're still there as well. They are still operating the laundromat, and that's, as you see in the drawing here, is part of the plan, is to keep them there.
Right. Thanks for that. I always forget the laundromat, but you're right. That is an important benefit for the community. There is a shortage of laundry services in the area, and they do a very good business. So
That's really awesome to hear. That one business, I believe the deli that you're talking about, I believe that was the one that sent us a letter stating that they want to stay at their building. Is that correct?
Yes, that is
Okay.
correct. And so let me just clarify that, because it is a little bit confusing. The person who owns the building owns that business. His name is Andy, and it's Andy's Deli. Andy also has behind the deli in a separate building a body shop. And the body shop, through all of the community public hearings that we had, there was never a sense that the body shop was a critical business. It is not a business that would be allowed in that area. Today, it doesn't meet the zoning regulations. Body shops are not allowed in an area that's zoned that way. And in all of the discussions that we've had, what Andy has said, consistently to us is, I really want my building. I really want to put the deli in there. I'd like to fix up the upstairs. Currently, the upstairs is uninhabited. I'd like to fix those up and make those apartments again. And as far as the body shop goes, it's kind of a hobby for me. So I'm not that locked into the body shop. Nevertheless, because it is an operating business, we're obligated to find him another location. So we have worked with him. We've identified other locations for the body shop. So far, he has not been willing to accept any of those other locations. And so now he's been, I think, pushing back a little bit on saying, well, maybe I can just keep it. The only reason that we would be hesitant for that is because we know that the body shop historically was an auto service center, a body shop. We know that it more than likely has some environmental challenges, and it would be extremely difficult to do all of the environmental remediation that we need to do in this area and leave a site that has been a problem. We did ask for permission to go on the site and do environmental testing, and we were denied that. So as a result, if for whatever reason we ever did decide to let him keep that building, the body shop building, it would be his responsibility then for any cleanup that's necessary, which could run into the millions of dollars. So we're not really anxious to have that be the outcome. I think that would be a very negative outcome for him if he ended up in a situation where it ended up being a site where either contamination is flowing from or to, and he is required to clean it up. So we're still working with him. We would still like to, obviously we want his deli, and we're thrilled that he's put some money into that and reopened it. But as far as the body shop goes, we're really not expecting that to be remaining.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I answered one of my last questions. I got one last question. I'm sorry, real quick. People that are retiring, how do we pay them out for retirement? Are we just buying the business? What happens in that situation? Because they could sell the business, but in this case, they're giving it to the city to redevelop. So what do we do in that case?
Well, we're required to pay them for the Uniform Relocation Act has very specific rules. If we need to go into a lot of detail on that, I'll let Rick handle that. But there are very specific rules for how the building and the business is valued, and then we're required to pay that value. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Rick.
Sure. There, as far as I know, in my knowledge of the Uniform Relocation Act, while I do know many of the provisions, I don't think there's a specific retirement benefit along with that relocation program. However, in the case where, and we've had some of these, where a business decides that, okay, rather than having to relocate and go through that, I'm already sort of thinking about retiring and not continuing with the business. And in those cases, they can elect to take a different approach to their benefits, their monetary benefits, under what's called a payment in lieu of benefit. And we know that a couple of the businesses have done that. That's a $40,000 benefit. It's different in that the way the other benefits work for actually relocating and continuing your business, they reimburse the cost for actually moving your equipment and moving your business and reestablishing your business. Those are costs that are reimbursed. This is just a straight up benefit of $40,000 that some of these business owners who've elected not to continue, they've elected to take that benefit.
Thank you very much. I won't take up any more time. I appreciate the explanation.
Councilmember Gruber.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions, but I'm just going to start with a basic one. Can you help me understand, or all of us understand, what is the actual job of the Dawson Group? Do I have that right?
Yes.
What is the actual job that they are doing? They are the ones who are ultimately responsible for putting together the plan in terms of layout, but also in terms of like soliciting the businesses to fill the places, finding the housing developers, etc.
Yes, that's exactly right, council member. In any development like this, we have a couple of ways that we can approach this. As an example, when we redeveloped the 6 acres at the inner loop, we took a slightly different approach. Rather than having one company look at the whole area, we took the 6 acres, we divided them into 7 parcels. We put out an RFP for each parcel, and then we picked a winner of each RFP and then let that developer develop that parcel. So the advantage of that is that you get multiple developers and their vision. The disadvantage is that you don't really have an overall planned aspect to the development. So you could have all housing, you could have all businesses, you could have some of each and some of the other. Our approach here with this is to, we did the request for qualifications. Dawson was chosen by the team that reviewed the responses that we received. And so what Dawson will be doing is taking, this area that we have that you're looking at on the screen, and they will be working with other folks in our community and in other communities to help select who will pick which areas and how it will all come together as a whole. So we know, for example,
and when is that work due by? Like, when are they supposed to have that done?
I'll let Rick talk about the schedule, but they are working on it now. We had a meeting with them day before yesterday. So they are in the process of doing this now. They will be coming up with some actual renderings of what, right now what you're looking at are just flat patterns on a piece of paper. What they will be coming up with is actual three-dimensional renderings of what buildings would look like. We can start then to think about building heights and building mass. We can start, we know that the buildings that are more toward the north side of the site, we would anticipate to be housing. We know that the buildings along Main Street and along Genesee Street will be retail, at least first floor retail, and possibly retail with housing or office space above. But we need to start to flesh that out.
Miller, so that was kind of my next question. So
yeah, go ahead.
So in other words, the Dawson Group has a contract with the city to be the ones who are accountable for putting together the kind of master plan for the site. But the city, the Evans administration and your department are going to have specific things that they're going to have to achieve, including, and I guess my question for this is, what are those benchmarks? Is it a certain number of units of housing? Is it a certain number of commercial establishments? Or is all of that just kind of up to what the Dawson Group throws at us as opportunities?
So I can respond. Oh, okay.
Go ahead, Rick. No.
I'm sorry. So I just want to back up a little bit because I think the second question relates certainly to the first question. As Commissioner was describing that process, as we all know, this is a very complex project. Everyone anticipates it to be a multi-phased project. As the Dawson, and I just want to come back to the Dawson team, it's the Dawson-led team that consists of other developers within the team. Brinshore Developers out of Chicago, they're part of that team. Shift Capital is another developer partner with them. They're out of Philadelphia. And so these have their own sort of specialty or discipline, if you will, within development. And there's residential, there's affordable, there's commercial. That said, what we really emphasized in the RFQ when we solicited this developer interest is that we encourage the mindset of future partnerships, even as they approach this project with their sort of conceived team, that, that's not the end of the story. Once we sort of get to understand them and they get to understand us and the site and the community and the project. And that's what they're doing right now, by the way, is their due diligence and taking that deep dive into the endless volumes of data and analysis that we prepared. That, this will spawn other discussions and potential partnerships to move various land uses along and development. So what they in the slideshow was pointing out is that they are undertaking a preliminary development plan now to roll out at the end of the summer or beginning of fall. In that process, they will be developing relationships, meeting with certain stakeholders. We anticipate, for example, Rochester Regional Health as a major stakeholder in Bull's Head. We're putting that meeting together, for example, so that we can realize the opportunities here. That process that they're doing is, if you will, sort of a first blush at taking this to market. It is certainly not going to answer all the questions. And frankly, even on our side, the public sector, there are some questions that haven't been answered yet, for them. So, and we both sort of parties know that. So we're taking our best foot forward, and we will have that preliminary development plan to show to the public for their input. Yeah, so there's sort of that aspect of looking at the marketability of this, developing those relationships, both locally and otherwise, and having their team, again, put their best foot forward for what they ultimately will conceive within certain parameters that we've expressed. One of those is, again, that Genesee Street and realigned Brown Street connection. Really outside of that, and some of the work over near Chilai and York Street and West Avenue, outside of those two areas, they have some flexibility, and they kind of want to seek these opportunities and understand what will the best fit be.
And can you share when is there? I understand timelines move, but what is the goal for having a master plan created by Dawson?
Well, the master, I would not use the phrase master plan. I would use the phrase development plan. As far as planning process goes, I mean, there seems to be consensus. We've exhausted. There's an exhaustion of planning, master planning, if you will. So this development plan, which will show what their thoughts are based on the due diligence they're doing now, the relationships that they will continue to make, will lay out what they perceive as what is buildable and doable and appropriate for the site. That will be the end of the summer, early fall, somewhere maybe September.
Great, thank you. I have two last questions. I appreciate your help here. One is related to the actual ability to attract retail tenants. This is a very difficult time for retail. Generally speaking, I think we've struggled. Places like Bull's Head have seen retail just pour out, which is part of the reason why we're doing this project now over the last decade plus. Whose responsibility is it to go look at regional, national retail establishments and try to get them to have a footprint here? Is Dawson responsible for that?
We certainly count on the level. They are a national developer, and they certainly have a breadth of networking and relationships that goes far beyond, certainly my ability or, the city's abilities, perhaps even some of the more local developers' abilities. And that was something that we took into account during the selection process. So yes, we do to some degree rely on them to start bringing in those ideas and those connections. Eric, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I would just add that they most likely will be working with their own commercial brokerage, and that they will have a responsibility to identify users to take the space. Likewise, we at the city we can play a certain role in terms of helping to be a matchmaker and identify interested parties who have come to us that we can then forward to the development team and hopefully make those connections and bring some of those firms in to open up shop.
Thank you. And then my final question can probably be a simple yes or no, but it's probably not going to be. I'm sure you'll want to give me some more detail. We could do that at a later time if you'd like. My understanding is that the previous administration was reserving one of those buildings as part of the plans to build out more section offices and neighborhood service centers. Is that back on the table in the Evans administration, that space may actually be part of the larger development, or is there still an opportunity, or is there still a desire to retain that building for municipal purposes?
Well, Councilmember, I don't think we absolutely know the answer to that yet. What I can tell you is that that building, which still shows on this diagram here, 160 Clifton Street, is a building that the city currently owns. So we own the building. It does have a tenant in it, and we are working with that tenant to relocate them. So at the end of that relocation, we will own a building that is currently not intended for any use. We don't know yet in this administration whether the plan for multiple RPD sections is still a plan or not. We don't have a permanent police chief yet. And we're anticipating that when we do finish a national search and have a permanent police chief, that the police chief will want to take a look at the way the organization is structured and make a decision on whether or not having 3 section offices, which is what they have now, 1 downtown, 1 on east side and 1 west side, or having 5, which was the proposal from the previous administration, or having 7, which is what we had before we went to the 2. We don't know yet what the police department will determine is their desired footprint across the city. So as a result, most of those
Commissioner,
have been on hold.
I'm well aware that NBD can't answer that question.
So we can't answer that question.
The question I'm trying to ask is when the Dawson Group is making this development plan, is that building in play for at least conversations?
So
Absolutely. It's a city-owned property, and as such, we're required, really, I think, by you as council members and by the public to make sure that it goes to the best and highest use, ideally. So it's absolutely in play. If someone comes in and has the absolute perfect use for it, then we would certainly argue strenuously for that use to supersede any of the other uses. But ultimately, you're right, it's not an MBD decision.
Great, thank you.
Vice President Lupien.
Yeah, I just had 2 quick questions. One, is there any synergy in the storefronts that may be built in those, that are going through cities programs to become, entrepreneurs or, getting business grants?
Councilmember Lupien, absolutely. What our goal is here is to do some things that we've not been able to do very successfully so far. We would like to create some white box spaces that could theoretically be any business, but would be available at a low enough cost so that startup businesses could go in there and start up. And we would like to have some number of those. We visited Newark, New Jersey, where that had been done, and it was extremely successful. So we'd like to leverage what we learned there. Rick and I went to Philadelphia to see what Brinshaw had done there, and they did something similar in an old industrial building where we visited a coffee roaster who had set up in this really low-cost space that allowed her to get in, get started, get up and running, and now she's shipping coffee all over the world. So we do anticipate having some number of these spaces that would be made available to folks who wouldn't necessarily otherwise be able to have retail space. So yes, that's absolutely a part of what we're planning.
I think that's great. And it's really important. It's nice to have some national chains or statewide chains, but that money doesn't stay in our community. So I think it's really important that we do find ways to prioritize, our local business owners. My second question is just about the church. Which church were you talking about that you were hoping to find a buyer so it could stay?
There's a little angle on the left-hand side of the picture where West Avenue and Shiloh Avenue come together. There's a West Avenue Presbyterian Church.
It's the one right in the center there?
Yeah, in the center on the left, yes.
Okay.
So it's currently unoccupied. The congregation that owns it is anxious to find another use for it. Ideally, that would involve someone purchasing it. And we're investigating what opportunities might be available. It's a very nice building. There's not usually one picture you'll ever find of Bull's Head that doesn't have that building.
Yeah, it's pretty central.
It's such a beautiful building. I mean, behind me in my picture, you can't really tell, but I have a 1930s view of Bull's Head behind me as my background. So
is that special for this meeting?
No, I use it all the time. I'm not using Midtown, but yeah.
Right. There's another church that's a little bit up, and I think maybe it's not in this catchment area, but the old St. Peter and Paul's, I think it's a Coptic Christian church now. Is that part of this area?
St. Peter's and Paul's is it's outside of this acquisition area, but it is still considered a part of Bull's Head. It's just to the
Yeah.
right of this picture on Main Street, right behind you can just see the top corner of the Walgreens store, and it's right behind the Walgreens store. So
Right.
yes, it's,
I know it's another,
Yes.
beautiful historic building that's struggling to be maintained.
right.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
So I just want to make sure our NBD Chair Patterson doesn't have any questions before I make a quick statement before we close. Chair Patterson, are you there? Any questions?
Nope, I'm good.
All right, thank you. So I don't have any questions. I mean, most of my colleagues asked the questions I would have asked, and I just have a quick statement pertaining to the pre-development or the preliminary development plan that is expected to start in 2022 in the summer. I just ask, the administration and NBD to lean on us, particularly Councilmember Harris, as this is their district, in terms of whatever outreach efforts we can support, however we can pump this out there. We certainly want to be allies in that work to get this out to the community for further discussion and strategy. So with that, I just would like to thank everyone for their time today. The presentation was excellent, gave us a lot of things to chew on, and I look forward to seeing the next steps in the process. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you.